I'm the general counsel, sort of a chief of staff title here at the Suffolk DA. I was general counsel at the Nassau DA for a while. All in all, I've been helping them manage these larger suburban DA's offices for 10 years or so. And yeah, I had to do a lot of disaster response in that, whether it was Hurricane Sandy or something going wrong with the procurement system or some massive fallout. It seems to be my lot, unfortunately, to have this come around where I do after action reports and sort of parade incompetence like the chains of Marley's ghost, just following me around to warn others. But I think it is important to do these after action reports so that we can all learn and we can actually have practical examples of what can go wrong and practical examples of how to fix it. So if you all can see my screen share, actually, Antonio, could you just nod that everything's going through? Okay, good. What I wanted to talk about, and the good thing is it was touched on before by Cy, so I'm going to sort of take a copy off of it. That I want to look at this mostly as an issue of security. When you start saying cybersecurity, people start to outsource it in their mind as something that's beyond them because they're like, "Oh, I'm a lawyer, or I work at a DA." Like, it's not me. But as Cy was eloquently putting it, it's everybody. And sometimes you confuse them and make them feel like, "Oh, well, I'm 20 years too old to care about this." No. The risk is never going to be zero. It is an issue of security. We need to understand acceptable risks. We have to mitigate them. We have to eliminate the unacceptable risks as managers. And I have some tips at all levels of the office to do that. So, and this is kind of an ABC diagram to kind of get everybody on the same page, right? So if you're in charge of a government office or a part of it, the security issues, like, you have maybe flammable items there, have old wiring, you have you're a target for gun violence or terrorist attacks perhaps, and yes, you contain sensitive information and people might want to exploit that. So then you move forward and you have those two plans that Cy was talking about. One is, what's the initial risk, what's the cybersecurity, and then there was also what's the cyber resiliency. See, I'm already starting to copy his terminology. So at the top line here, for the first thing about, we have old wiring, old, flammable items. First step is you want to mitigate your risk of fire. But the risk, as we talked about, is never going to be zero. So then you want to have that resiliency plan where you're, of course, then mitigating risk of injury. Like, how many fire extinguishers? Are people trained to use them? Do you have the, first aid kits? Do you have evacuation plans that you drill on, so to speak? So that way, even if a fire occurs, you know how to get people out of there, the fire suppressed, and people back in. Same thing now moving over to B, as far as that fact that government offices are targets for active shooters and terrorism. You want to mitigate risk of authorized entry, but once it happens, because the risk will never be zero, how do we mitigate risk of death? Do we drill on run, hide, fight? And finally, so then I go on to C and talk about, you want to mitigate your risk of breach, of course, but after that, let's also talk about, and that's what I had to unfortunately get a lot of experience with, is how to mitigate the effects of the shutdown itself. So cybersecurity, if I had to drill any random person on the street or do some training, I would say it's simply security. It's just another layer of security that befalls any organization. And as Cy talked about, it's important to normalize that and get people thinking, take them out of that word cyber that might freak them out. Because when you start thinking of something hyper-technical, you run that risk of that shadow compliance, like people pretending they get it, actively nodding at you, or imagining that somebody is going to take care of it. Like, our IT department's got that one, not me. No. It applies to all offices and all office equipment. It covers your personal and professional social media accounts because, you're interconnecting all the time when you're plugging in private devices or taking laptops home, connecting from private or public Wi-Fi or home Wi-Fi if you're a remote worker. And so it addresses on and off-duty conduct. So the same way I would drill any employee when they're starting that they are not to hold the door open for anybody walking in. You have to see some ID. That's the same kind of diligence you need them to do with their Wi-Fi connections when they're a laptop at freaking Starbucks. This is my horror story. This is the after-action report. So Suffolk was literally unplugged 1 year ago, almost more than 1 year ago today. And I'm still feeling the effects of it. For example, even today, I couldn't download the speaker bios that Chris sent me. I could barely get on this link because we have so many now responsive measures that limit our connectivity, but that's a good thing, right? So the entire county, my entire county of 1.5 million people, disconnected from everything due to a cyber intrusion or cyber attack on our county servers. We'll talk about the chronology. Just September 8th was the date they finally pulled the plug. That was not the date of the intrusion. That was not the date of the attack. That was the date when county IT specialists observed that it was an uncontrolled intrusion. It was rapidly growing to other portions of the county network. They did not know how to stop it. They say unplug everything. I was sitting in a meeting. I get somebody walking through the door being like, Jed, not only do we have to shut down every operation, but we have to order all staff to literally unplug their things from the wall. We contacted state and federal law enforcement. We got not just one private sector vendor, we probably got 6 or 7 private sector vendors for various different aspects of recovery and investigation and containment and remediation. What that means in a practical sense, if you're just sitting in my chair, sitting in your chairs, working for prosecutors' offices, we immediately had no email, no meetings, no scheduling. That's even hard when you think about your operation suddenly switch to there's no email. And we have 7 physical campuses at our office. We couldn't even tell people very clearly what the heck was happening. Even the order to unplug was analog. You know, it was like Pony Express, just sending out riders to go to the different locations, office to office, to tell people to unplug. And then what are their responsibilities? What are they expected to do? It was too late. We already lost the ability to kind of mass communicated drill. So when Cyvance is talking about tabletop drills, do it in advance so that when you're the plug, they go into this, you know, secondary mode where you've already drilled on what you're supposed to be doing if everything goes dark and quiet like a Russian sub. So no access to saved work. That was a big deal. We lost that immediately. No communication with police. We couldn't immediately interact with them, but also for discovery purposes, you know, the police and the DA, we exchange information all the time. We just spent years building digital networks to exchange information. And in a blink of an eye, we couldn't file things with court. We couldn't review sufficiency. So it was a terrible, terrible thing to go through a year ago today. So as I said before, it was actually the last step of infiltration. And this is not an uncommon tale. This is just this is our tale, but representative of many. So as I learned later from the FBI and a lot of colleagues in the cyber universe, hackers don't seem to want to work any harder than they have to. You know, if they wanted to work an honest living, they would. But a lot of them are peeking, poking, and then when rent's due, they'll see how far they can take a certain project. So at the first step in December 2021, they gained access to the Suffolk County Clerk's Office systems by going through a vulnerability that actually was advertised. The Log4j was actually advertised widely in the media around that time. That, oh my goodness, there's a vulnerability. Everybody should watch out for it. Did my county upgrade? No. So there we go. So like a tunnel, they came in through that unpatched vulnerability. By March, they had installed remote management tools and could actually run the clerk's office computers from afar. Did the clerk's office pick up on this? No. By April, they had created their own account, the first of several fictional rogue users empowered with administrative permissions. And they were smart enough that they actually put in these accounts names of real people who worked there, but the letter would be off by like 1. So my name is Jed Painter. They might have done like Jed Painter with like an extra T or something that they thought was maybe not noticeable. So that was an example. They would actually create these accounts that were close, but not close enough. And then around August, they started actually lifting files, including one stupidly labeled passwords, and they installed scripts that collected login credentials, allowing every clerk employee's passwords. Now we're off to the races. And then at that point, they felt that Suffolk County had not detected them. We were lazy enough to be attacked. So they jump to other separate systems from the clerk's network, and then they hit the encryption button and sent a ransomware request for $2.5 million, threatening to hold us hostage. I should point out at this point, because I'm not going to come back to it, that probably the cost of remediation has to be, it's now incalculable, but it's well north of $15 million. But we weren't going to pay for them to attack anybody else. Okay, so now we move on to mitigation. While we weren't directly impacted, we were part of the mitigation plan. Remember, it wasn't us who were attacked. It was a completely different department, a said, you know, it's in his city, it was not necessarily the work of one department. Everybody's a co-equal partner. So in the cyber world, so we were a mitigative measure by we voluntarily unplugged, precautionarily unplugged, so that they couldn't spread to us. They maybe to 3 county agencies by that point. But the county servers also, we disconnected connectivity, and we didn't want it spreading anywhere else. Now, other mitigation measures that I would strongly encourage as practical advice to anybody, any office of any size that's listening. We had, fortunately, just that August, booted up our Rave emergency communication platform for office employees. Now, I was thinking at the time we're going to get this spin up for tornadoes and hurricanes, severe weather. Was hurricane season going to come up, fires, active shooters, and we wanted a quick text-based way to communicate with our staff. Turned out it was extremely valuable, because then we had already logged maybe 75%, 80% of our staff for emergency communication. So I could let people know what was going on. I was the administrator on the account. I could send out instructions on how to log into our cloud-based storage programs and give them updates on what we were doing, what was happening. So before we knew it, we were actually within hours communicating with our staff and letting them know what the heck was going on. The cloud-based services saved us. We use a New York software called DEMS, sponsored by our one of our nonprofits here, and cloud-based case management systems. Those were not affected. The only problem with that hurt our ability to utilize them is a lot of these cloud-based programs smartly require multi-factor authentication. The multi-factor authentication is usually tied to the work email address. The work email address was inoperative. So that was a completely different administrative skill set, calling these companies and begging them. It was a hilarious moment in my life where I'm calling them and say, hey, listen, you know, we were just a victim of a major cyber attack. Would you mind reducing your multi-factor authentication to allow us to log right into your system without a secondary thing? They were like, no, what the hell are you talking about? You're going to spread to us. So after a little bit of working out that issue, we were able to send multi-factor authentications to cell phones, because we still had those, and in some cases private email accounts, and in some cases just through personal friendships. I gave somebody an advanced list of every employee's name and spelling of their email address and spelling of their title, and if they identified themselves, the initial login as that title, that person at the company would click them through as a multi-factor authentication. So within a day or so, we were actually still rocking and rolling and be able to go to court with our laptops and still prosecute crime and receive crime. The rest was professional relationships, and this is not something you can necessarily pre-plan. Just don't, make sure that just as Cy was talking about with the buckets of water going towards the house. Everybody's going to have some trouble sometime, and if I saved your house, you'll probably save my house. The fire won't spread to the whole village. So, due to being a good neighbor, hopefully, and having good neighbors, we didn't have motions, we didn't have subpoena templates, we didn't have anything, and that's really needed. Blood warrant templates, starting everything from scratch, Westlaw. So our neighboring DAs came to the rescue. They would send us, when we asked them, do you have a template for a court order? Do you have a template for a subpoena? Do you have a template for a whatever? So it's a little bit of mutual aid at work there too, and that really helped us pop back onto basics. And then, of course, we gained priority as a DA's office towards restoration, and we had to poke quite fast and hard to get a completely different network set up for us, because we could not transmit confidential material deemed secretive under New York law, sealed under New York law, through Gmail, through Hotmail. We couldn't do it. So we stressed, sort of like, not money is no object, but we need this stuff fast so we don't violate sealing laws on wiretap information and grand jury information, and that also helped us. So we're not alone. The stats since 2017, current as of June, there's been over 3,600 known municipalities that have been targeted. I've listed some of the New York breaches, but nationwide, the 3,600 stat is there, and municipalities are generally more published than corporations, which can settle things privately and nobody would know. But that's a good stat, and it's rising regrettably. So, okay, what do we do? As far as executive management, it's really important. And now I don't have too much trouble anymore convincing staff that this is a real threat because we've lived through it. But for those offices who are fortunate not enough to have lived through it, you really do need the executive management to I guess just do their jobs and make sure that you're treating it like a very real threat, because it is a very real threat. You need to develop and enforce a published set of guidelines and procedures for all staff. I intentionally use now the word passphrase, not password. I'll show you an example later, but password is an outdated terminology in cybersecurity. Nothing should be one word. It should be a complicated phrase involving all sorts of numerical figures that are much easier to code. Data backup, of course, it should be in your policies. Recovery policies, as I said before, when the lights go out, we were lucky because we had rave. There needs to be tabletops of, if this goes out and like code black goes over some sort of radio signal, everybody knows what to do and how to get access to their data. You know, they're going to remote work protocol, something like that. So emergency communication, we use rave. You can use anything, but I recommend you get that up quick, and recommend you get 100% buy-in or something north of 80% buy-in, because it's not going to do any good if you can't communicate with your staff in the event of an emergency, whether it is an active shooter or a cyber shutdown. And restoration protocols. Access controls and least privilege principles. Of course, nobody should be seeing anything above their pay grade. It really is a situation where you can see that filtering down to even how you set up your email network, about who's allowed to email all staff and what staff is allowed to receive from the outside world that comes through unsniffed, so to speak. The regular security training and workshops on the latest threats. It is just as important as active shooter. Or fire drills. It should be put in your security training, a regular security training, not cybersecurity that's special that people wave off and think I'm never going to learn how to use a computer anyway, so I don't want to learn how to do this. And then on the right side of the screen here, something that's become a big problem in the modern workplace that I don't think is regulated enough by security professionals is remote work agreements. I don't know how many I know the private sector is really flourishing with very strict technological minimums for remote work. Government needs to follow suit. If you do have a remote work source, you have to know what their guidelines are. What is their minimum security? Where are they allowed to log in from? And there's another aspect that I'll cover when I get to cell phone usage, but you should very much have minimum technical requirements and security requirements no matter where they're logging in from. This is a little bit of how they get you in case people didn't know, but mobile devices, they can be very vulnerable, and I include laptops in that definition, to various types of attacks, whether it's network, phishing, device, just straight up device theft or loss. But anybody who has a mobile device is a security threat for your office, essentially. So the middle management, what you need to be doing is tracking physical assets, all of them, and the printed documents that might have passcodes or sensitive data to prevent the authorized access or theft. Because even with a simple printed document, not shredded, somebody could construct a nice email saying that they know about a certain case or a fact pattern and looking for additional information and basically catfish somebody. So it is very important to dispose of things properly. I would not allow any photographs in the office at any time. There's plenty of examples of people getting photographed in the office and Post-it notes on their stuck to their monitors or in the background. I would just, as a middle manager, strictly enforce there is no photography within the office because you don't know what's going to be in the background. And viewing station use is something very important that members of the public or defense attorneys who want to show you something, they do not plug into your computer, they do not plug into your network, they plug into a identified viewing station that is completely separate from your network, so there's no chance of contamination. And I think it's self-explanatory to monitor your mobile device, social media, so especially social media and email usage. And the middle management is the frontline reporters of issues, and they are responsible mostly. They're on eyes on the ground, compliance with office-wide policy. They do need to interrupt those poor practices and frame good habits the same way you would tell them that if you see somebody letting somebody in the door and holding the door open, you say, hey, listen, you're not allowed to do that. You have to check ID. You're not being a rude person. You have a script. You say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to, I don't recognize you. I would need to see identification to hold this door open for you. It's awkward, but sorry, you have to do it. Strict email discipline is a major aspect where middle management can come in. Quite honestly, there's tons of articles about how email is destroying middle management, even that people are emailing too frequently, not developing their ideas enough, bouncing off of supervisors too fast, too recklessly, and everybody's just doing everybody's job. Quite honestly, email discipline, reducing the email volume would be good for everybody's sake. Definitely embed, don't attach. When I say embedding, I mean links to secured maybe OneDrive files within your network. Don't attach files, and don't email any more than you have to. On the right side, you'll see I say be mindful of off-hours communications that put your office technology in perilous. Generally speaking, for quality of life purposes, try to give your employees some time off. But generally speaking, if you know that somebody's on vacation and you know they took their laptop or their phone or personal phone that has their email on it, and now you're sending them a message and asking them to respond or review an attachment, and now you're going through Wi-Fi networks and foreign networks that you're increasing a security risk to your office needlessly. Let them be on vacation. Let them be in the Bahamas. You don't need to bother them at places where they might not have a secure connection and not be able to VPN to your office. Just the less times you make people log in remotely, remote work, again, is a huge minefield. So, and for general staff, again, you should be using sharing features, not attachments. I again reiterate that password is an outdated term. Passphrase is what you want to do. You probably can't, in item 2 there, that's just Mountain Dew is the best soda ever. Like it just takes a little bit of time, come up with something that's personal to you, Lord of the Rings, whatever it's going to be, and you figure out a way to make it a little bit encrypted, and you're good to go. So people also do not realize, if you have an Office 365 suite, that you easily have the ability to enable encryption and do not forward safety features on your Outlook emails. And you should absolutely do that. Regularly back up your critical data into encrypted removable storage or cloud-based services so you can get them if you need them. Biometric authentication features on mobile devices, remote tracking and wiping on mobile devices, connect only to secure networks. And again, note well the remote work arrangements that you have with your office staff. Make sure that they're not going to, Panera Bread all the time. That's not their thing. Make sure they have privacy screens if they're doing that. If you know they're working in fields, you know what I'm talking about with the privacy screens that you can put over your laptop screen, so people do not see what they're working on. Report unfamiliar installs immediately if you're a staff member, and promptly install upgrades and patches. I think all the IT professionals in attendance are probably like just screaming their heads off at their staff all the time. We send out these upgrades, we send out these patches. We need you guys to do that on your phones or whatever we can't control, especially remote work. I don't know if I have too much time left, but I do want to point out that commingling public and personal life is a terrible idea. It makes your workplace more vulnerable to personal uncontrollable habits. So where you can issue a office serviced phone, if you have the budget for it, rather than having people install your work apps onto their private mobile devices, that'll really help you out. It's worth the investment. If you're like, oh, I can't spend this much per line. We got a $2.5 million ransom demand and 50 million. It's just spend the money. Social networking. I can't seem to stand the way that people also, whether it's the taking pictures in the office, the posting, the advertising where they work, who they work for, it makes you vulnerable. It makes your staff vulnerable in the sense that it identifies them as a high-profile target for a cyber attack. They know that you have information that people want. Okay, you don't work for TGI Fridays. Nobody's gonna identify you as a potential person to breach. But if on social media you're broadcasting where you work and all the cool things you just did, and hey, it's LinkedIn, proud to join this new group that's forget about it. I hate it. So I put in here that you're not allowed to have friends. I'm sorry. On social media, you really have to be careful. You have to adjust your private viewing settings. It's for your security. It's for the office's security. You are a you are a catch. You will be catfished. You have highly enticing information at your disposal, and you have to view your posts through the lens of, oh, well, that's a different issue about social media compliance, but whether you can be subpoenaed or appealed or anything like that. So all this being said, that anything that somebody is doing with one of your employees in a social media space should be highly controlled. There should be strict guidelines, and definitely not on office equipment. You're only as strong as your weakest link. That cyber resiliency is as important as cybersecurity. I mean, it's all gold, and while it might even sound like lofty, I hope at least what my goal was to show you that if you can't somehow manage to instill in your staff that this isn't lofty, far-fetched stuff that they can outsource, it's gonna happen. The odds are ever climbing that it's going to happen to you. So when it happens, definitely have a remediation plan, so that you can get back to work.